Just what everybody wants after 2 nights of seders and other sermon. But here we are. So we're the morning after the second seder. So the question needs to be asked, how are this year's seders different from all the other year's seders we've ever done in our lives? And how is this morning after moment different from any other morning after moment that we have ever had in our lives? Because this morning after moment is in fact different. And I want us to own that. And to get at how this moment is different from any other morning after moment in our lifetime, I want to share with you 2 stories. The first story concerns a person who's a beloved friend and longtime member of Temple Emmanuel. And his mother was born in Londorf, Germany. And she was taken as a teen from Londorf to Auschwitz. And all of her family died in Auschwitz. And all of the Jews of Londorf died in Auschwitz but for her. She is the only survivor of her family. And she is the only survivor in Londorf to go and survive Auschwitz. And she would go on to have a beautiful life. She came to America. She got married. She had children and grandchildren. She radiated hope and optimism and warmth and love, and left a legacy of generations of love. A remarkable woman. And as you know, Auschwitz was liberated on January the 27th, 1945, which meant that this past January 27th, 2025, was the 80-year anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And so our member, the son of this remarkable woman, and his wife, they went to Auschwitz-Birkenau on January 27th for the 80-year commemoration. And there they said Kaddish for all those who perished in Auschwitz. And it turns out that it happened to have been his mother's yahrtzeit that day. So his words of Kaddish just had multiple meaning. And I was talking to him about the experience and the unreal intensity of that experience. And he asked me such an interesting question. It was a question I had never been asked before. It was a question I had never even thought about before. Here's his question. Could you imagine a Jewish story without the hatred? Could you imagine Jewish history without the persecution and the suffering? And I said to him, wow, what a question. Never thought about that before. But my initial thinking, and we were talking in February, was, and I quoted the line that we all said last night and Saturday night from the Haggadah. We all know this line. We've all said this line every year in our lifetime. B'chol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. In every generation, a new enemy arises to destroy us. So I said to him, I don't think we could have our story without the suffering. I think suffering comes with the Jewish story. That's the message of the Haggadah. That's the message of Jewish history. But I suspected that I was missing something, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then 2 Saturdays ago, I learned what it was. Michel Tzion was speaking here. He, of course, lives in Israel. He's an expert about Pesach and the Haggadah. And there was this crucial point in his speech that just was an epiphany for me, that lit a light bulb for me. He was talking about the difference between his 12-year-old daughter, Ella, and his 8-year-old daughter, Sapir, as they encounter the complexity of modern Israel. And this was just a revelation for me. He said, one Friday night, he and his 12-year-old daughter, Sapir, were walking home from Shabbos dinner at friends in Jerusalem. They live in Baka. And as they're walking, it's 10:30 at night, the sirens start to sound because the Houthis have fired off missiles. And he and his daughter have to find a safe room as soon as possible, and they run around and they scurry and they find a safe room of a complete stranger, and they crowd in there, and they're in this crowded safe room among strangers. And his 12-year-old daughter says, Mazot, what is this? Meaning, this is clearly off, this is wrong, it shouldn't be this way. This is not the way it should be, Mazot. And Michel Tzion said, my daughter's question was very on target. I did not have an answer for it. And then he talked about his 8-year-old daughter, Sapir. She grew up, by the time she could speak and understand, she encountered COVID, unprecedented political instability in Israel, election after election after election, unprecedented civic strife in Israel, demonstrations and counter-demonstrations, then October 7th, and then 18 months of war, and the hostage saga, and endless numbers of funerals in their neighborhood, of soldiers and of hostages who were killed in Jerusalem. And she no longer asked, she never asked Mazot, because this just is. She's grown up in a world where this just is. And then I realized the missing part of my answer to my friend's question, which is to say, can you imagine a Jewish story without suffering? For the most part, the answer to that is no, suffering comes with. But, and here's what I just realized a couple Saturdays ago, there actually was a holiday from Jewish history where there was no suffering. There was a holiday from Jewish history where there was no suffering, and it happened to have coincided with all of our lifetimes. I was born in 1961, and so from 1948 until October 6th, and especially from 1967 until October 6th, we had a holiday from Jewish history. We went from having no secure home to having 2 secure homes. Went from having no secure home to a secure and strong home in Israel before October 7th. And in America, we just finally had a place where Jews were at home and no persecution and no suffering that we really experienced in our lifetime. And I was thinking about, once I heard this sermon, I was just reflecting, and I'm seeing Beverly Weinfeld. I went to college with her son Larry. We were roommates. We were at Harvard from 1979 to 1983. That was 42 years ago. 25% of the student body at Harvard College, when I was in college, was Jewish. 25%. There was no apartheid wall. There was no apartheid week. And I saw with my own eyes Israeli flags draped off the buildings of dorm rooms in Harvard Yard. That was 42 years ago, and that was a lifetime ago. But it's not just the world of anti-Semitism is so different, our holiday from history is over, but also the erosion of democracy, the erosion of democracy in America, the erosion of democracy in Europe. I was listening to a daily. There's really a must listen. This was a daily this weekend. It is about this German organization that exists. Its reason is to find unburied Europeans who died during the wars of Europe. And according to this, 55 million Europeans died between 1918 and 1945. We always think about the 6 million, but 55 million died, and they're buried in all kinds of places and fields. And the story, it tells the story of a couple, young couple, buying their first home in Poland, and they get a knock on the door, and this organization that is trying to find unburied bodies says, we think you have some German soldiers in your garden. It turned out there's 110 dead German soldiers buried in there. And the posture of this was that that's the fruit of fascism. The fruit of fascism is war and death on a big scale. And of course, the party that got the second most votes in the most recent German election is the alt-right party that says enough with the guilt and enough with all the second guessing. They got the second most votes. And what's really scary is that our vice president went there and said there shouldn't be a firewall between people who are on that party who say enough with the guilt and don't second guess Hitler anymore, and they got the second most votes, give them their seats, and he was rebuked by the Prime Minister of Germany. So we live in a world where the holiday of history is over. Harvard isn't Harvard, democracy isn't democracy, Germany isn't Germany, America is not America, democracy is not democracy. And those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. And that's where we are. The holiday from history is over, and this morning after the seders is about confronting and owning that reality. So what do we do about it? So, both for the seders and for religious life in general, there are two very different purposes. They're allied and complementary, but different. One is an internal game. We go to a seder and we feel good about the seder we went to. We go to shul and we feel good about the service that we went to. That's about community. That's about sitting in the same seats in the same pews. That's about doing life with people through the years. That's about having tuna fish and, please God, one day after Pesach, bagel at Kaddish. That's about catching up with your friends. That's about song. That's about learning. That's about an afterglow you get from a really good seder. That's an afterglow you get from a really good service, and that's very important. But if that's all we get, if the only outcome of our seder, if the only outcome of our service was that we feel better and we have an afterglow, then we have achieved 50% of the purpose of a religious project, 50%. And we've left 50% on the table. And the sentence that best captures that other 50% is from our Quaker friends who taught us that after the benediction is over, the real service begins. After the benediction is over, the real service begins. So, the bad news is, our holiday from history is over. Israel, the Jewish world, anti-Semitism, America, democracy, they're in a radically dark place. And we need to own that. Our holiday from history is over. The good news is, our religious life just got much more urgent. So what do we do about it? So I shared this when we saw it a couple of weeks ago from the reading in Vayikra about the reparation offering, the Asham. Harold Kushner says as follows: we are held responsible not only for the wrong things we do, but for the things we should but do not do. During the Shoah, as well as in other circumstances, bystanders who did not act to oppose evil caused enormous and irreparable harm. In Jewish law, one who has knowledge about a crime or legal dispute and does not come forward to divulge it is innocent before a human court, but liable in the sight of God. The reparation offering is how the Torah seeks to resolve that conflict. So I want to say that we are all living in the age of the Asham, of the reparation offering. And usually we think about the seders as 4 questions. But in the age where the holiday from history is over, I think there's just a single question for all of us now in the morning after the seders. What should I do now that I have not done yet to make our world better? 1 question, not 4 questions. What should I do now that I have not done yet to make our world better? And to be able to really engage that question, I think we need to acknowledge an obstacle to it. And Daniel Hartman talked about this. He was speaking at B'nai Torah in Boca Raton, where we have some snowbirds. And he described this moment, and I know that the moment he describes happens to me all the time. You're watching the news, or you're on your screen, and you see a story that's unpleasant, that's sad, that's hard, and you shrink, and you shrink, and you shrink, and you shrink, and you click, 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 and you change the channel, because it's just too uncomfortable. It's just too uncomfortable, and we shrink. And that's the Asham offering. Because we shrank, because we clicked, because we changed the channel, we bring an offering for the thing that we should have done that we did not do. So what is the thing that we should do that we haven't done yet? So I'm not going to give you any answers. You'll come up with your own answers. I listened to an ad for National Public Radio that really spoke to me, the NPR Spring Festival. It said, we don't tell you what to think, and we don't tell you how to feel. We bring you the news, and then you know what to think and you know how to feel. And I don't have any bullet points for you, and I don't have any 3-point plan or 5-point plan or 7-point plan for you. I just have a single question. What should I do that I haven't done to make this a better world? We bring you Jewish values as best we humanly can, and then you'll come up with your own answer. But I want to say that the Seder and Judaism can be super helpful here, and I can prove it from just the best TV show, The Pit, which is about an emergency room, a trauma center in Pittsburgh, and the main doctor in it, Dr. Rabinovich, known as Dr. Rabbi, is just a tower of strength for about 10 episodes or so. And there's an unreal amount of trauma that makes its way into this trauma center. And then one day, there's a mass shooting. And over 100 patients come in, they've all been shot, they're all bleeding, and every doctor is doing the best they can. And Dr. Rabbi tries desperately to save a young woman, and he can't save her, and she dies. And he goes into a room, and he collapses, and he cries, and he's sobbing and sobbing. And more patients come in. And he's on the floor sobbing, and the other doctors are looking for him because they need him, they need his wisdom. And he's on the floor sobbing. And then another doctor named Whitaker, who's a lovely non-Jewish guy, grows up on a farm, sees Dr. Rabbi. And Dr. Rabbi's on the floor crying, and all of a sudden you hear him saying the Shema. You hear him say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then Whitaker gets him up and says, we need you. And then he asks him, what were you just doing? And what were you just saying? And Dr. Rabbi says, I'm saying the Shema that my grandmother taught me. It's a prayer. And Whitaker, this lovely Gentile guy, grows up on a farm, resonates with prayer. And he starts quoting from Isaiah chapter 40. Those who have faith in God will have their faith renewed, and they'll run without ever growing weary. And Dr. Rabbi, who's a good conservative Jew, says, I don't think I actually believe in God, but that prayer just gives me strength. And remembering saying it with my grandmother gives me strength. And he gets up, and he gets out, and he gets back into the ER to heal this broken world. So, that's us on the morning after. We share so much. We share a broken world. We share a holiday from history that is over. And we share a question. What should I do now that I have not done yet to make our world a better world? May the seders we just did, and may the Yiddishkeit that you do and will do, inspire all of us to get up, to get out, and to do our part to heal our broken world. Chag Sameach.